What's up, everybody? Big Herc 916. Subscribe, share the channel, represent, getting down with Fresh Out. And I have with me here today Lindsay, a very special guest with a colorful background. And I want to get some backstory on how she grew up because we don't have very many women on our channel. So, Lindsay, can you tell the people a little bit about your background, like how you grew up and where you're from?
So I was born in the Bay Area. I was born in Vallejo, California. But I bounced around a lot because both my parents were in the music business. So my dad was a musician, my mother's a record executive, and we kind of followed the music. So a lot of times, like when I got to high school, that was the 12th school I'd been to by the time I got to high school.
Oh, wow.
And people would always ask, like, oh, you military brat? And I was like, no, music business. Or as my mom calls me and my brother, rock and roll babies. And so we moved around a lot. So I've lived in both Northern and Southern California. I've lived in Maryland and DC, and then a few places in Georgia, and now I live in Arizona. And so, in the early part of my life, there was the music business side of it. Celebrities coming in and out of the house, getting to go to all these different events, getting to see my dad's group function on Soul Train. My mom actually said the first time I said dad or daddy or something like that was actually seeing one of my father's performances on TV. And so again, like I thought that's how everybody grew up. That was just how we lived. And so then my dad stopped performing. I want to say sometime maybe in the mid 80s he stopped performing. So now my parents have like regular jobs, which was weird to me. My father sold cars and my mother was doing loans, and I'm like, this is weird. But they were still involved in the music business too. I mean, at one point we lived in Maryland, they had a little recording studio in the basement and they managed a few like local artists and things like that. So we were still doing it, but just in a different way. And then my mom got back into the music business when she got offered a job working for MC Hammer. And that was through, she got that connection through one of Confunction's bandmates who was working with MC Hammer. They came to town, say, hey, I want you to meet this guy. I think you really like him. Come see his show. And if anybody's ever seen MC Hammer perform, it is a spectacle. You know what I mean? There is so much going on. Like, have you ever been to like a Cirque du Soleil show? Yeah. And there's just like, this person's jumping over here and there's lights and there's this. I mean, that is what MC Hammer's show was like. And it was so dynamic. And if you weren't entertained the whole time, you clearly were on life support because it was just such a good show. And I remember my mom walking away like, I got to work for this dude. Like, this is it. And so she worked for him. And we ended up moving back to California then. And, things were trucking along, and eventually, my parents separated, and my dad stayed in California. The music business was popping in Atlanta in the mid 90s. And so my mom was working for herself by then, and we moved to Atlanta and was all immersed in the Atlanta music scene there. And the funny thing is, I'm a huge Outkast fan, but not when I first moved to Georgia. Because I'm coming from California. I didn't understand what anybody was saying in Georgia because everybody speaks so fast. You know? And so I'm just like, what? And then like trying to get used to like Southern rap. I'm like, do people complete their words? Like, I don't understand. And so, but my mom was actually working with Outkast at the time.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, who wants to listen to that? And someone who ended up being one of my best friends is like a brother to me. I did not like him at first. He sat in front of me in junior ROTC and he used to touch stuff on my desk all the time. He used to make me so mad. And I remember saying to him one time, please don't touch my desk again. I don't understand the words that you use. You don't complete a word. I don't know what over here and over there is. I don't know what a shouty is. I don't know what none of that is, right? We became best friends, right? And so he listened to Goody Mob and Outkast all the time. And actually, my dad is the one that actually introduced me to Goody Mob. And so that became like the soundtrack of like my high school years and some of my college years also. And so, high school was cool. Like I said, I was an ROTC, kind of a nerd, not like super smart nerd, but just I'm kind of geeky and kind of stick to myself. And I'd rather stay home than go get in trouble
Yeah,
kind
yeah.
of thing. Like people like, hey, you want to go? Nah, it's cool. X-Files is on. I'm just going to kick it here, watch some NYPD Blue. And then my plan after high school was to go into the Air Force because I was an Air Force Junior ROTC. And my instructor actually convinced me to look at college. And I was like, I think I'd do a good job in the Air Force. She's like, I think you would too, but I think you're better suited for college. And if you don't like it, come back and I'll gladly sign your paperwork. Of course, I got to college and loved it because it's boys, alcohol, freedom to kind of do me. And then that was still going to kind of be my plan, even though she had pushed me towards college. But then, unfortunately, 2 weeks after I graduated from high school, my father was shot and killed in a home invasion. And my parents were divorced at that time, so it was not my home, but he did live close. He would still come over for dinner. It's one of those things where my parents were much better apart than they were married kind of thing. So he was still very involved in our lives, but that obviously put like the brakes on me wanting to leave home, because when you go into the military, you're an instant adult and you're very far away from your family, and we're very close, and that just wasn't something I was ready for. There's a 6-month period after my dad died where I honestly can't tell you what I did. I don't remember. And eventually my mom was like, all right, listen, y'all got to shake the cobwebs off. And she's like, we lost your father and it is very sad. But remember, Lindsay, you had your father for 17 years. She told my brother, you had your father for 14 years. There are many children in this world who never even get a chance to have that bond with their parent. And it's not that she was trying to downplay it or anything like that. She's like, basically what that taught me is be grateful for the time you have with somebody, and let's not stay in this space, And so I eventually, with some struggles, went off to school and stuff like that. And after graduation and, becoming a police officer, I didn't realize how much my father's death affected me sometimes at work. Death notifications is not something I ever enjoyed doing on the job, because to this day I can remember the detectives coming to our house and breaking the news to my mother, and it was not a warm and fuzzy conversation, I will tell you that. I remember it kind of being cold and direct, and I always remember thinking, even before I knew I was going to go into law enforcement, like I would never tell somebody that their loved one was murdered, basically, in that fashion. But those calls were always super hard for me, and I would let my supervisors know that, and I would have to have somebody else come with me, because I would kind of zone in and kind of go back into that day when the detectives showed up at the house. So when I talk about people bringing trauma to the job, that's one of the things I'm talking about. We have a lot of unresolved trauma as first responders that we don't clear out before going into a career field where trauma is going to find you. But as far as my dad goes, I talk about my dad a lot. My kids who never met my father, they know who he is. We talk about him. They've seen videos. They've seen pictures. They talk about him like they knew him, kind of thing. My son this past year wanted to have a Confunction-themed birthday party. So I made T-shirts. I printed out pictures and put it on the cake. We had music. I busted out albums. So I thought that was very sweet and a way to honor my father, somebody he never met. But for me, it could have been very easy for me just to say, oh, my father was murdered, I can't do anything. I'm just going to keep still and not do anything. I'm going to let that dictate my whole life in a negative way. And I used to go back as a guest speaker for ROTC, and by that time the landscape of the school had changed. Like the demographic was different. We had a lot of 2-parent households, middle class families, and now it's not that way anymore. The area has gone down a little bit, so you don't have those same 2-parent households, and like even the 1-parent household, you don't have a lot of families. Some of the families don't have those strong ties. So we have kids in group homes, foster care. So there's a lot of different things going on, and kids are just looking for that structure, right? And ROTC was good for that for them. And the kids got to know me over the years, and then finally I shared my story with them. And like some of them were like, oh, I didn't expect that from you. And I'm like, well, why didn't you expect that? They said, because of the way you speak and because of how you dress and just how you act. And I said, you don't have to wear your trauma on the outside.
That's right.
If something bad happens to you, that doesn't determine who you are for the rest of your life. You know what I mean? My dad, I love my dad to death, but he was a human being. He struggled. He had addiction issues and things like that. He struggled as a person. But how he died, you know, getting shot and stuff like that, that doesn't dictate who he was as a person. He was a great father. You know what I mean? He was a great friend. You know, my mother can talk on the husband part, but he was a great musician and all these other things like that. So he was all of these things before this tragic thing happened to him, right? And I tell the kids, I know some of you all are going or dealing with tough things right now, but that doesn't have to be all that you are. You don't have to be a self-fulfilling prophecy and say, well, this happened to all the men or all the women or all the people in my family, so this is going to be the direction that I go in. You steer the ship of your life.
That's right.
You know what I mean? And so I share that with the kids, and now, you know, when I talk about my shooting and stuff like that, I could very easily allow that to be all that I am. I got shot, I can't do anything. But, you know, I was talking to somebody last month, I think we talked about this off camera, where a guy said, you know, you're not given the gift of trauma to keep it to yourself. You know, I don't know if he got that from somewhere or a quote or anything like that, but you're not. You know, you made it through this tough time. We should be talking about this because there's other people that are going through something similar. And people need to know we're humans. We're not built to be by ourselves, right? We want validation. We want to know that somebody else is out there feeling the same sorrow or the same joy that we're feeling, to be like, oh, I'm connected to something, you know, at the end of the day. So, you know, that's one of my biggest things, is just when I look back on my life, you know, at a great life, at an interesting, you know, young life. My life now is great. I'm very supported. I've had a lot of things happen. Even with the bad things, there has been good things that have happened. I don't advise getting shot because it hurts, but I've had a lot of good things accompany that negative situation. Rather it's just a change of perspective, meeting new people, getting to talk to people like you, and open up a little bit more about my life and what I've done and where I've been, and just sharing that story with people and letting people know, like, you know, you can change the path your life is going on. You don't have to be this tragic situation.
Well, that's why I think it was so important to get you on the channel, because it's not our typical interview, and we learn through other human beings. You know, everybody's so quick to just like say, oh, well, this old book, this old that. Well, what about new experience? There's new people that have great stories that aren't stories that were written thousands of years ago, that you guys are still holding core. This is it. This book right here, this is the only book. There's a new book every day being written.
Yeah.
And so to hear your story, a new chapter, new book, a new perspective, and new energy, it adds value to humanity and to understanding people, you know, culture, women, you know, so many different things. And we miss out on a lot of that because nobody wants to sit down and have this conversation, you know. And I think, like, you know, your story, which is, you know, it has so many different elements to it, and it brings up, so many different values that young men can take, young women can experience, older people can experience, the entertainment industry, the law enforcement industry, you know, the Black community, and it's just so much they can get from that. So I think you bring a lot of value in your story to our channel, and you know, I always try to do something different. You know, I can sit here and talk about war stories all day and just bullshit, but I think, you know, having these other conversations that people don't like to have, and to get these stories, these are invaluable. You know, I always say that it's a shame we don't have more older people, kind of like Native Americans. You remember they used to have the elders tell the stories, or the old tribal, and we don't, you know, and then when that person dies, that's gone. And it's not written down, but it's like, you know, mouth to ear. You know, we need more of that so it could wake these young people up so they can hear this stuff and be like, wow, I never knew that. Yeah. You know, and like you said, we get it all, I get it. Man, where are you from, man? I mean, I had one lady ask me, like, are you African? Are you from? I said, no, I'm I'm like, well, are your people from Africa? I said, I don't know where they from, but I was raised in Northern California, and then, blah, blah, blah. But it's funny, man, because like people like, perception is so limited because it's everything you see on social media. And so they don't really have that interaction. And you guys are lived all over both coasts. I haven't lived all over both coasts, but I've been around a lot of different people. So I pull different experiences from things, and I try to think about those experiences. And that's what makes people unique, is when you haven't lived in a bubble. You had these different interactions, and it adds to your life experience.
But I think that's important, like you said, it's just being around different types of people. And you don't have to move all over the country. Just expose yourself to different types of people, because not everybody thinks just like you. And that's not the worst thing in the world. And I think we've lost, just trying to understand where other people are coming from. A lot of times when people, like we were saying earlier off camera, like people don't know how to debate. They don't know how to have differences. Everything is so emotional all the time. And it's just like, why can't we have a conversation? I have friends from all walks of life. We don't agree on every single thing. I don't even want to kick it with somebody that we agree on everything. I get on my own nerves. Why do I want to hang out with somebody who's just like me? I like different perspectives too. And so it's just one of those things of exposing yourself and understanding that everybody isn't going to like you. I'm not for everybody, and everybody's not for me, like people say all the time, and I'm okay with that. I don't have to get emotional because somebody doesn't agree with me. My attitude is like, okay, you don't agree with me, moving right along. And I'm not going to go seek out someone who only agrees with me, but I like having a well-balanced, conversation. And it's just interesting in just like thinking about, I think, some of it too is like natural personality. I've always been the type of person who wanted to understand why. Like, where does this come from? Why do I behave like this? But a lot of times people don't know how to self-reflect. It's very easy to blame somebody else. I tell my kids that. I said, if you get in trouble, don't blame it on somebody else. You chose to do that. I said, no, but even in a really crazy situation, nobody really forces your hand. You still made a decision to do A, B, and C. I said, don't let other people control your actions and reactions. You control your actions and reactions. I don't want to hear, well, so-and-so did this. You chose to say that. You chose to put your hands on that person. This is where we are.
That's right.
And so it is your choice. It's not somebody else's choice, right? They may do certain things that may lead to a certain reaction from you, but you still made that choice to react in that way, right? And so I think for me, I've always been like that, and it sounds like you've been like that to a certain extent. And both of us in different ways have had time to have to keep still and really reflect on life, because I was home for 8 months after my shooting. I tell people, be careful what you ask for out of life, because I was complaining about not seeing my husband enough because we work opposite shifts. I was complaining about working mom guilt, and then I got shot and I was home for 8 months. And I remember like 2 months in thinking, this isn't exactly how I planned to spend time with my family, but I got it. And I had time to keep still and kind of think about things and kind of think about, okay, this is the path I thought my life was on. Life picked me up and put me on a different path. What am I going to do with this? Because there's no going back to that previous path.
That's right.
And I don't know if you hear this when you're talking to people, but when it comes to trauma, and I hear this because I do peer support for first responders, and I hear, I just want to go back to before. I just want to go back to before this thing happened. I've said that myself. I've had panic attacks, even in this year, panic attacks because I don't like my reactions. I don't like not being able to enjoy certain events that I used to enjoy, and having that feeling that something crazy is going to happen at every turn. I don't like it. And it's like, I want to go back to before. I want to go back before the day I got shot, when life was seemingly normal for me, right? But there is no before. We have to deal with the cards that are dealt to us, and we have to move forward, and it's a slow move forward. It's not instant. It takes time and it takes work to process it through. And so you got to be a little more introspective, right? Because you're like, all right, well, this is where I am and I got time. I got a whole bunch of time to think about it. And to me too, just in a different way. And it's just like, okay, I didn't see life like that before I got shot. Now I see things differently. I tell people, don't get shot to have a different perspective on life, but it will change how you view life and how you choose. It should anyway, choose how you live life, how you look at things, and how you look at the relationships in your life too. I want to be more, have more purpose and be more intentful when I'm talking to people, when I'm spending time to people, rather than just taking even our time together today. I'm not going to take this for granted. Like, this is a connection. We're having a conversation and we're talking about real stuff.
But too, one of the things, like you said, go back to before, and I used to sit there and think about when I was locked up, I'm like, dang, before I went, what would I do if I hadn't gotten to the bank robbery that day? But you can't stay the same. People got to evolve, and that's the thing. A lot of people don't want to evolve.
Yes.
Some people, they want to continue to waddle in that same stuck. Oh, when I was a kid, my dad did this, and my mom, and they got doing this and that. And it's like, dude, move on.
But it's comfortable. That's the thing.
Yeah.
People become. I have this saying: people become friends with their traumas. Right?
Yes.
And it's very easy to hide behind your traumas.
Yeah.
It's very easy to use your traumas as an excuse to not do things.
That's right.
But I can't remember the author, but A Man's Search for Meaning. And he talks about being in a concentration camp during the Holocaust. This man kept the craziest positive attitude you will ever see on somebody in a concentration camp. Because his thing is, you can't get in my mind.
Yeah.
This is where I am. I'm not, he says, you could see the people. There's a point in the book, he says, the people who had totally given up that space in their brain, you can see it in their demeanor. And they are waiting for death, is basically what was going on. So if this man can not only survive a concentration camp and all of his family was murdered and go on to become a very successful, go back to what he was doing before in psychology, so can I. I can get shot 3 times and pick up the pieces of my life and move forward. And I get it. Times are different and things like that. People are different, but just think about that. Like that's wild. It's a really good book. It's not a very long read, but just thinking about perspective and being like, damn, like I had to put it down a couple times and be like, he was in a concentration camp and he came out on the other side in a better mental space than some people today that have access to therapy.
But a lot of people, when it comes like to a situation like that where they have to challenge their comfort, they don't want to do it. And I always try to put myself in uncomfortable positions. And I remember like being in places and especially inside and like, having to strip down and be in front of these dudes and just like deal with this very animalistic and people. I'm like, man, I'd be like, God, why am I here? Why did damn, man, why can't I just stayed in bed or said I didn't feel good? Or when is this going to end? I'm only 3 years in. I still got 8 more. It's like I used to be there and it's like, please help me. And I used to try to figure out, but then I'm like, okay, I got to always act like tomorrow if I got free, what would I do? And that's how I live my life in there. So I never said I was like, oh, I'm an inmate convict, or I always said, okay, if I get out tomorrow, I'll be on the 405. I'm gonna go to PC, go to the beach, go work out at Venice. I was always picturing myself, what if they somehow said, 10 minutes, you're free, your appeal, or you got this, you got lucky, so I always try to keep that mentality, and that gave me hope, rather than just settling in and watching BET and football, and just like, this is home. I couldn't accept prison as home. I couldn't clean their shit. I couldn't this is not my reality. And those same people, when I see them at the halfway house, they would be struggling with reality of freedom. They would be, oh man, they didn't get no job. They'd be depressed. I'd be looking at them like, dude, them are the guys who are watching that TV all day and like getting comfortable in there. And I always tell people, man, create your reality and find your identity. And if you've never taken the time to really do that, you realize a lot of what you've programmed yourself to be isn't really even your original program. Nothing of that is who you really are. Whether it's, you listening to this person in church or your parent or this or teacher, what is really you? Have you ever analyzed any of those things you heard growing up or what the homies told you?
But a lot of people don't, and now with social media, it's so easy for your phone to make you believe that you are someone you're not.
Yes.
And not like you said, because you're inundated with all this stuff all the time, and life moves like this. And like I said, in different ways, you and I were put in situations where we had to stop. We weren't, there were just certain things that just weren't being filtered through us.
Right, yeah.
And I think the most important thing you just said was the hope part. Because when you lose hope, everything else goes away.
Yeah, that's a
wrap. If you can't imagine yourself on the 404, kicking it at the beach and doing all this other stuff, if you've resigned yourself to the fact, well, this is my life. You know what I mean? And it's like, that's a broken person. And that's sad because you've essentially, you've just stopped. You're waiting for life to take control of you in a way of rather it's going to propel you forward and you're going to be successful, or you're just waiting on life to totally swallow you whole and kill you off. We have to be very careful with that. And there's nothing wrong with being self-reflective, because it is cause and effect. And a lot of the things that we do, some of it's natural personality, but we're influenced by a lot of things. But then you have to ask yourself, how much of this decision right here was influenced by somebody else?
That's right.
And how much of this was my natural personality? Like, I can kind of pick out my natural personality and things, and then how I was influenced by other things. And so I think getting older helps us too. Because as we get older, you tend to have less friends the older you get.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because my thing is, I don't care.
Yeah.
I like me. My family likes me. My kids like me. I don't care if I go out and meet a new person. They're like, well, I don't want to be your friend. I'm cool with being Lindsay.
You know what I used to always say too? And I think back, I'm like, damn, why couldn't I have thought of like this when I was 21? Why couldn't I have had this game? You know what I mean? But it's like you live a certain way. Like when you get to this age, and I hate to say this age, but I look back and I'm thinking, damn, if I was 21, what if I'd have been thinking like this and I could have made this?
No,
but I wasn't. You know what I mean? Because you're so immature, but you think you're mature at that age.
But the problem is, I think, and I just had this very same conversation last week about if I were younger and I had the knowledge I have now at 43 back then, I think, and this is just me, you may have a different opinion, I don't think we would appreciate where we are in life the way we do now. If we thought the way back then, the way we do now, or had that knowledge or experience, I don't know, because in your 20s, I think you're supposed to be stupid. You're supposed to explore and test your boundaries and all that other stuff like that. But if you don't go through the bad stuff, if you don't fall down, if you don't make mistakes, I don't really think we appreciate when things are going great as well. Does that make sense? What I mean? Because it's just like, wow, I think it's stuff decisions I made with relationships in my early 20s, that was dumb. I wish I hadn't done that, but I'm glad now because of the relationship and the marriage I have now. Yeah. I'm glad I went through those things because it would not have led me to the person I'm with the kids that I have and the life that I have. I could have been married at 22, which is crazy when I think about that. And I probably would have been divorced with 2-3 kids too.
I just kind of think sometimes I wonder, I'm like, could there have been another way to figure out the answer? I don't, but you can't. What would have been another way?
We don't know. If somebody has the answer to that question, we'd be rich.
I know.
You know what I'm saying? Don't steal our idea. Yeah. But I mean, I think life, you have to grow and you have to have these different perspectives. And I think you're a great example of, having good stability and having good things, and then just making a decision that was, maybe out of character, maybe not. But it's led you to us sitting here having these conversations and you exposing the world to different perspectives and being like, hey, I served time, but look what I'm doing now. Yeah. And you not walking around wearing that on the outside. That's what I tell people. Most people don't even know I got shot until somebody else brings it up. Yeah. And this is the response I get. Why didn't you say something? I'm like, I'm supposed to introduce myself and say, hi, my name is Lindsay. I got shot 3 times. Anyway, could you pass pass the sangria? That's not how that works. It'll come up naturally, but I do have different perspectives on things. And if that's the first thing you have to put out about yourself, I think you're kind of lacking in the confidence area. If that's you throw that out there first.
Well, that's the same thing. I mean, I've met people multiple times at different events, and they're like, man, you never told me you did time. I'm like, dude, why am I going to tell you? I mean, it's not like... Does
that affect our relationship, though?
No, remember, my son said he's seen your thing and this and that. I'm like, okay, well, but I didn't feel that was relevant because it's not like I need to wear that yeah, man, I've been to the pen. I was up in there. It's because that's not what I think is who I am. Yeah. It's something I experienced, but I'm not going to let that define me.
But see, I think that's the important part, just what you said. It's something you experienced, and you're not going to let it define you. All too often, people allow the traumas and the negative things to define who they are. You know, and I'm just like, you're a person.
Yeah,
you are
yeah.
a whole person before either you made a decision or somebody made a decision that put your life in a different direction.
That's right.
You know, and that's and a lot of times that we can compartmentalize these things, but it doesn't. That, you know, I'm more than a former officer who got shot in the line of duty.
So much more.
You know, I'm a wife, I'm a mother, I'm a daughter, I'm a sister, I'm a friend, I'm a mentor, I'm all of these things. And I was some of those things before my shooting happened.
That's right.
You know, so don't put me in a box and say this is all that I am. You know, I am the daughter of a musician and a record executive. I had a whole life before I even became a police officer. So don't put me in this box and be like, oh, well, you're a cop and you don't understand. Because I mean, I have a, you know, I got into it, but I had a cousin say something negative about my line of work, you know, and I was just like, but you've known me all of your life. Do you really think, you know, this is how I am and this is how I think? You know, so that messed up our relationship because of that. But I don't have the time or energy to try to make people see things my way. Either you are or you aren't, and you made the decisions you made in your life. I've made the decisions I've made in my life, and this is where we are today.
Well, hey, I'm glad you shared your story with our audience and our fan base. I'm sure we'll get a lot of great comments and other young women reaching out to do interviews, and I appreciate your time. Hey, you guys, Lindsay, we'll have her contact info in the description. You know, share the channel, like the channel. Big Herc 916, fresh out. Stop walking around with a crusty butt, smelly ball sack, and a funky hoo-ha. Big Herc said, wash that ass. Pick you up a t-shirt at freshoutseries.com.